Let me tell you something that most folks won't. Something that may just save your life or the life of someone you love. If you're over 70 and you've been feeling off, even if it's just a small, nagging symptom, listen closely. I've lived a long life, and if there's one thing I've learned, it's that time is unforgiving. It does not wait for anyone. Not you, not me, and definitely not the stubborn part of us that thinks, it's probably nothing. Imagine this, you're in your 70s. You've seen decades pass from black and white televisions to the gadgets in everyone's hands. You've survived challenges, losses, and joys that others may never understand. Yet now there's this tiny sign. Maybe it's a weird pain you brush off as just old age, or it's a sudden shortness of breath when you climb a set of stairs that had never used to bother you. Maybe it's a constant feeling of fatigue, a tiredness that clings to your bones. You think it's normal. After all, you're 70. But what if it isn't? I had a friend, Frank. We used to sit on his porch, sipping coffee and sharing old war stories. He was tough, a real stubborn guy who never went to the doctor unless he absolutely had to. One day he mentioned this persistent cough. Just an old man's cough, he joked. A few months later, that cough had him in the hospital. By then it was too late. The doctors told him his lungs were riddled with cancer. If he had gone sooner, maybe things would have been different. I think of Frank often, his laugh, his stubbornness, how he thought he had more time. I'm not saying every cough is cancer or every ache is a heart attack, but here's the reality. After 70, your body doesn't fight off problems the way it once did. A symptom that seems small, something you'd have ignored 20 or 30 years ago, can be the first whisper of something serious. I know you might think that going to the doctor for every little thing is overreacting. But what's worse? A visit that turns out to be nothing, or the regret of waiting too long? Let me paint another picture. There was a woman I knew, Martha, sharp as a tack. She started forgetting little things where she put her keys, a word here and there. Her children said, "Mom, it's just old age." But she knew something was off. She saw a doctor. Early Alzheimer's, they said. Because she acted quickly, they were able to put a plan in place. She got more time, real quality time with her family, because she listened to her body and her instincts. When you reach 70, your body has carried you through a lot. Maybe you've faced injuries, illnesses, or loss, but it's still your body, and it still speaks to you. That little pain in your chest that you brush off as indigestion could be your heart signaling distress. That sudden weight loss you think is a blessing might be a warning. Ignoring these signs because you think, "I'm just old," is like ignoring a fire alarm because you assume it's a false alert. Sometimes it's not. I had my own scare a few years back. I started feeling a heaviness in my chest. It wasn't sharp, just a dull weight that came and went. I convinced myself it was just a part of aging, just the cost of living a long, full life. My wife, bless her heart, nagged me to see a doctor. I went just to quiet her down. Turns out I had a blocked artery. The doctor said I was lucky. A heart attack waiting to happen, he called it. I still think about how close I came to ignoring that sign, to never seeing my grandchildren grow up. Fear is a funny thing. It can protect us, but it can also trick us. The fear of knowing something is wrong can make us pretend everything is fine. We don't want to face the possibility that our bodies are no longer invincible. But I've seen what happens when people wait too long. I've been to the funerals, sat with the grieving spouses who said, "If only he had gone sooner." I've watched as families try to piece together what could have been prevented. Now listen to me. If you have a symptom, any symptom that feels off, that lingers longer than it should, that makes you feel uneasy, see a doctor. If you're suddenly struggling to catch your breath, if there's pain in your chest or unexplained weight loss, if you're forgetting things more than just misplacing your glasses, if you feel a tiredness that sleep can't cure, do not wait. Do not convince yourself it's nothing. Do not assume that because you're old, it's just the way things are. Maybe it's nothing, and wouldn't that be a relief? But what if it's not? I am not a doctor, but I've seen enough in my years to know that the smallest symptom can be a big warning. The difference between life and death can be a single decision. The decision to act, to pick up the phone, to make that appointment. Maybe you think it's a hassle or that you don't want to be a bother. Maybe you think, I've lived long enough. But if you still love the sound of laughter, the warmth of a sunrise, the embrace of a loved one, if you still have something to live for, then it is worth it. Don't let pride or fear rob you of time. Don't be the person whose family says, "I wish they had gone sooner." Don't let a small symptom become a big goodbye. Take care of yourself like you would take care of someone you love. Because after 70, time is precious, and every heartbeat matters more than ever. If something feels wrong, even a little wrong, see a doctor. Not tomorrow, not next week, now. The life you save might be your own, and believe me, it is worth saving. Now let's clear some common questions. How can healthcare providers improve communication to help seniors feel more comfortable discussing their symptoms openly? Let me tell you something from a place of experience. Not from a textbook or a lecture hall, but from the long road of living through 70+ years, dealing with doctors, nurses, and hospitals more times than I care to count. When you reach a certain age, your body becomes a bit like an old house. Some creaks here, a crack there. Some days you know it needs fixing, and other days you just learn to live with it. The trouble is, those creaks and cracks can sometimes be more serious than they seem. The real challenge is finding someone who will listen to you without rushing or brushing you off. Healthcare providers have a tough job. I know that. They see so many people every day, and it must be hard to truly listen to every story. But when you're sitting there, an old man or woman with a worry gnawing at your mind, you don't see the hundreds of patients before or after you. You see your fear, your confusion, your pain. You see a person who has already lost friends and family and knows time is not promised. You see yourself hoping that anyone will take you seriously. I think healthcare providers sometimes forget that older people grew up in a world where you didn't just run to the doctor for every little thing. When I was a kid, you toughed it out. You rubbed some ointment on it or slept it off. Doctors were for serious things, real emergencies, and when we did go, there was a sense of respect. You didn't question the doctor, and you didn't expect them to question you. Now things are different, and maybe that's part of the problem. Older folks might feel like they're just another appointment to check off. They might feel like the doctors assume they're just old and complaining. That can close a person up faster than anything. I had a doctor once, a young fellow, barely out of medical school. I went in with a pain in my back that had been sticking around for weeks. He hardly looked up from his tablet, barely asked me any questions, and told me it was just part of aging. I walked out of that office feeling like a burden, like my worries were just wrinkles to be smoothed over. A year later, I saw another doctor, an older woman who had a few gray hairs of her own. She asked me questions, real ones. Not just the checklist kind. She listened to my answers, even when they wandered a bit. Turned out I had a kidney issue that needed treatment. If that young fellow had taken a little more time, maybe I wouldn't have spent a year thinking I was just an old man complaining. To make seniors feel comfortable discussing their symptoms, healthcare providers need to remember that we are more than our gray hair and our shaky knees. We have lived through wars, through losses, through heartbreaks. We are not afraid of pain, but we are afraid of being dismissed. When a healthcare provider looks at a senior and sees just another case, it's like erasing all those years of living. Really listening means making eye contact, not interrupting, and not assuming that we're simply getting old. It means not rushing through the questions like a quiz, but making it feel like a conversation. Healthcare workers need to understand that older folks may not always know the right medical language to explain what they're feeling. We might say we're just tired when it's actually shortness of breath. We might think it's just a little forgetfulness when our minds feel foggy and unfocused. I think it would help if providers asked more open-ended questions, not just the standard, "How are you feeling?" Because that usually gets the answer, "I'm fine." If a doctor asked me, "What's been weighing on your mind lately?" Or, "Is there anything that's been worrying you?" It might get to the heart of the matter quicker. It might feel less like a test and more like a talk. Trust is a tricky thing for seniors. We've lived long enough to see systems fail, to see people turn their backs, and sometimes to be treated like we are no longer capable of making our own choices. If a healthcare provider speaks to us like children or assumes we cannot understand, it creates a barrier. But if they take the time to explain things in simple terms without being condescending, It shows respect. If they say, "Here's what I think and here's why," it invites us into the process rather than shutting us out. Sometimes it's not just about what is said, but how it is said. A gentle tone, a little patience, and a sense of empathy go a long way. I know doctors are busy. I've sat in those waiting rooms for hours, but a few extra minutes of genuine attention can change everything. When you're old, those minutes feel precious. Feeling heard can make a senior more open about their symptoms, more willing to share the uncomfortable truths that might be hiding behind their silence. I also think there is power in vulnerability, not just on the patient's side, but on the provider's side too. When a doctor or nurse admits they do not have all the answers, but are committed to helping find them, it creates a partnership. If a provider says, "I may not know exactly what this is yet, but let's work together to figure it out," it makes a senior feel valued, not just processed. Families can help too. If healthcare providers involve family members or caregivers with permission, of course it can give a fuller picture. Sometimes we seniors forget things or hesitate to speak up out of pride. A trusted family member might have insight or gently encourage us to share more than we would on our own. I suppose what I am saying is this: healthcare providers can improve communication with seniors by slowing down, asking thoughtful questions, listening with patience, and showing that they see us as whole people, not just aging bodies. We have stories to tell, fears to share, and symptoms that are not always easy to explain. If you take the time to truly listen, you might just find the truth hidden between our words, and you might save a life that still has more living to do. I may be old, but I still have something to say. I still have a voice, and when someone listens to that voice, not as a formality, but with genuine care, it reminds me that I still matter. And that, my friend, is what every senior truly needs to know, that they still matter. In what ways can routine health screenings be optimized to detect early warning signs that seniors might overlook? Let me tell you something from a lifetime of living a lifetime that has seen more sunrises than I ever thought possible. When you reach 70 or 80 years old, your body is like an old, weathered book. Pages worn and frayed, stories fading a little around the edges. You learn to accept a lot of changes, the slower steps, the creaking joints, the aches that come and go. After so many years, you expect a bit of wear and tear. What you do not always expect is that these little changes can sometimes hide bigger problems. That is where routine health screenings are supposed to step in, but too often, they miss the mark. I have been through more checkups than I can count. Some doctors were attentive, patient, and genuinely curious about what I had to say. They asked questions that made me think and opened up space for me to share the things I had brushed off as just old age. Other times, though, I felt like I was just another appointment, another box to tick off before they moved on. When you have lived as long as I have, you learn when someone is listening and when someone is just waiting for you to finish talking. I think that is part of the problem with routine health screenings. Too often they are designed for efficiency instead of connection. They focus on the obvious: blood pressure, heart rate, cholesterol, and while those things matter, they do not tell the whole story. I once went in for a regular checkup, nothing special. The nurse took my vitals and the doctor glanced at them quickly. He asked if I had any pain, and I said no because at my age, pain is just a part of life. But I had been feeling more tired than usual. Not the kind of tired that a nap fixes, but the kind that makes your bones feel heavy. I figured it was just old age, nothing to fuss about. He never asked about my energy levels or if I had noticed any changes in my appetite or mood. A few months later, I found out I had a thyroid issue, something that could have been caught earlier if anyone had asked the right questions. That is what I think needs to change. Routine health screenings should not just be a checklist of numbers. They should be conversations, deeper and more personal, especially for older folks who might not realize that their normal is actually a warning sign. When you have been living for 70 or 80 years, you learn to put up with a lot. You dismiss things that younger people might rush to the doctor for because you have made it this far, and surely you can make it a little further. But that mindset can be dangerous, and a rushed health screening does not help. Doctors and nurses need to be trained to ask questions that go beyond the surface. Not just, do you have pain? But, have you noticed any changes in how you feel day to day? Not just, are you sleeping well? But do you wake up still feeling tired, no matter how much sleep you get? They need to ask if we have lost interest in things we used to enjoy, if we feel more irritable or anxious, if we have noticed changes in our appetite or weight. These are not just casual questions. They can be signs of underlying health problems, depression, heart disease, thyroid issues, even cancer. Another thing I believe could help is involving family members or caregivers in these screenings, with the patient's consent, of course. I have seen it happen. A senior goes to the doctor and says everything is fine because they do not want to complain. They do not want to seem like a burden. Meanwhile, their spouse or adult child has noticed they have become forgetful, more withdrawn, or more easily confused. Bringing those people into the conversation respectfully can provide a fuller picture. We do not always see ourselves clearly, especially as we age, and sometimes we need someone else's eyes to notice the changes. Technology can also help, but it needs to be used wisely. I have heard about telehealth appointments and remote monitoring, and while I am not the most tech-savvy person, I see the value in it. For seniors who have trouble getting to a doctor's office, these tools can be a lifeline. Imagine having a simple device that tracks your heart rate, your oxygen levels, your blood pressure, and sends that information to your doctor automatically. It could catch patterns that you might not notice yourself. Of course, technology is only helpful if the patient understands how to use it and feels comfortable with it. That means healthcare providers need to take the time to teach, to make sure that the tools meant to help us do not become more barriers. I also think that routine screenings should include a focus on mental health. Too often, people think mental health is something separate from physical health, but it is not. If you are feeling isolated, lonely, anxious, or depressed, it can wear down your body just as much as illness. It can make you less likely to pay attention to other symptoms, less likely to take your medications properly, less likely to eat well or exercise. I know plenty of seniors who have lost spouses, friends, and parts of their independence. It is easy to slip into a quiet sadness that no one notices, least of all yourself. Routine screenings should gently explore those feelings and treat them with the same seriousness as any physical concern. Most importantly, healthcare providers need to take the time to listen. I know they're busy, I know they have a lot of patience, but a few minutes of genuine attention can make the difference between catching a problem early or letting it grow into something that cannot be fixed. Sometimes all it takes is one thoughtful question or a willingness to hear more than the quick, polite answer. Ask us what keeps us up at night. Ask us what has changed, not just in our bodies, but in our hearts and minds. Make us feel like we are still seen, still heard, still valued. Routine health screenings do not need to be complicated to be effective. They just need to see beyond the numbers and into the lives we have lived and are still living. They need to respect the fact that we have been through a lot, that we might not always know when to raise a flag and say, this is not right. A skilled healthcare provider knows that it is not just about checking off boxes. It is about understanding the quiet ways we cope, the small things we dismiss, and the fears we keep to ourselves. If routine health screenings can do that, if they can see us as people and not just patients, they can catch the things we overlook. They can give us more time to watch the sunrises, to hold the hands of those we love, to share the stories that still need telling. And in the end, that is all any of us really want. To be seen, to be heard, and to be given a chance to keep living fully for as long as we can. How can seniors and their families prepare for potential health crises, ensuring quick and appropriate responses when symptoms arise? Let me tell you something that comes from a life lived long enough to know how quickly things can change. I have seen friends and family go from laughing over a cup of coffee one day to lying in a hospital bed the next. Their lives turned upside down by a health crisis that no one saw coming. When you get to be my age, you realize that your body has its own schedule. It does not send you a warning letter when something's about to go wrong. It just happens, and suddenly you are faced with decisions that need to be made quickly. That is why I believe so strongly in preparing for health crises before they happen. Because when you are in the thick of it, with fear and confusion buzzing around you, it is too late to start figuring things out. I have had my share of health scares over the years. A heart that does not beat quite like it should. A fall that sent me to the hospital faster than I could blink. Each time I learn something new about what it means to be prepared and how unprepared you can feel even when you think you are ready. The truth is, there is no way to prepare for every possibility, but there are steps that seniors and their families can take to make sure that when something happens, it is not total chaos. First of all, communication is the cornerstone of everything. I have seen families who avoid talking about the tough stuff about what to do if mom cannot make her own decisions or if dad has a stroke and cannot speak. It is uncomfortable and no one likes to think about those things, but avoiding it does not make it less real. I have had those talks with my kids, and it was not easy. They did not want to picture their dad laid up in a hospital bed, and I did not want to think about them having to make choices I might not agree with. But those conversations brought us closer because now we know. They know what I want if I cannot speak for myself. I know they will do their best to honor my wishes. It is not just about talking, though. It is about making a plan and writing it down. When you are in the middle of a health crisis, emotions run high, and it is hard to think clearly. Having something written, a plan that everyone has seen and understands, can be a lifeline. I have a document that outlines my medical history, my medications, my doctors, and my preferences for treatment. It is not complicated, but it is clear. My kids know where it is, and so do the folks who might need to use it. I also have a medical power of attorney, someone I trust to make decisions for me if I cannot make them myself. That piece of paper gives me peace of mind because I know if I am not able to speak, my voice is still there through the person I chose. I have also learned that it is crucial to have a list of emergency contacts, not just your son or daughter, but neighbors or friends who live nearby. When I had my fall, my neighbor was the one who called for help. My kids live a few hours away, and if it had not been for that neighbor, I could have been lying there for a long time. Make sure someone nearby knows where to find your emergency information. It might feel like sharing too much, but in a crisis, that information can make all the difference. Medications are another thing to think about. I take a handful of pills every day, and keeping track of them is no small task. I keep a list of my medications in my wallet, along with the dosages and the reasons I take them. If something happens and I cannot speak for myself, that list can help doctors understand what my body is used to and what it cannot handle. I have heard stories of people who had bad reactions in the hospital because no one knew what medications they were already on. That is a mistake that can be avoided with a simple list. It is also important to have a plan for transportation in an emergency. If you live alone, like I do, you need to know how to get help quickly. I have one of those emergency alert devices, the kind you wear around your neck, and press if you need help. At first I thought it was a bit much, like admitting I was more fragile than I wanted to believe. But the day I fell and I could not reach the phone, that little button was my lifeline. If you cannot bring yourself to wear one, at least keep a cell phone nearby and make sure it is charged. It is a small step that can make a big difference. Families also need to know the signs of a health crisis. Sometimes seniors do not want to admit that something is wrong. I have been there too. You think if you ignore it, it might go away. But if your mom suddenly seems confused or your dad's speech is slurred, do not wait. Call for help. It is better to be safe than sorry. A stroke, a heart attack, even dehydration can look like just old age until it is too late. Learn the signs, know what to watch for, and trust your instincts. Beyond all the practical steps, there is something deeper that families need to prepare for: the emotional part. When a health crisis hits, it can feel like the ground is shifting beneath you. I have seen my kids struggle with the fear of losing me, and I have faced my own fears of losing my independence. Those feelings do not have a simple solution, but talking about them, acknowledging them, helps. Families need to give each other grace and patience because a crisis is not just a medical event. It is a family event. I suppose that is the heart of what I want to say. Preparing for a health crisis is not just about paperwork and phone numbers. It is about love and trust and understanding. It is about having the hard conversations before they become urgent and taking the practical steps that make those conversations easier to navigate. It is about making sure that if something happens when something happens, you and your family can focus on what matters most: being there for each other. I know my days are not as plentiful as they once were, but I want to live them well. I want my family to feel confident that if something happens, they will know what to do. And I want them to know that if the day comes when I cannot speak for myself, they will not have to guess what I would have wanted. That is what preparing for a health crisis really means, not just avoiding panic, but protecting the love and dignity that have taken a lifetime to build. If you liked today's discussion, don't forget to like the video, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, hit the subscribe button and the bell icon to stay updated with every video we release. And yes, don't forget to share your experiences and thoughts in the comments. Every comment is special to us. Your feedback helps us improve further. We'll continue to meet you in every new video on this channel, so until next time, take care.